Let me ask you this. Have you ever had an unpopular opinion on a popular guitar? Something that it felt like everyone around you loved, but you just couldn't wrap your head around?
Well, for me, it was always a pretty simple answer. And it's called a Jazzmaster. For some reason, the idea of the offset guitar never really appealed to me. In my mind, they lacked the traditional looks of the Strat or the Les Paul, and I thought that they occupied a really weird space sonically. And to be completely Emily Blunt, I just thought that these were the guitars that were for the indie players that wanted to label themselves as different. But that's sort of where this guy came into the picture. What you gotta know is that the offset for a couple of years, particularly the Jazzmaster, has been really growing on me.
Now, I don't know if it's because of my growing love for indie music or just my maturing taste in gear, but my entire perspective on guitar seemed to change on what felt like overnight.
And trust me when I say getting a Jazzmaster only made it worse. You see, this is my American Vintage 2, and I've had it for a couple months now, and although it's in desperate need of a new setup, it's grown on me more than I possibly ever thought it could. And it's even gotten me asking more recently in terms of offsets, like, what else is out there?
So I decided to start from the very basics with my research of what even is an offset guitar.
So from what I'm reading from Google, the legal definition of what would make something an offset guitar can be described as having an asymmetrical waist. Pretty simple definition, but I wanted to be absolutely sure that I wasn't missing anything. And from what I'm reading, a lot of people like them because they find the body shape to be more comfortable, which, let's be honest, is a definitive priority. And not to sound too Gen Z in this moment, but outside of comfortability and playability, I genuinely think the vibes of a guitar are one of the most underappreciated aspects of finding out what you like in something. And I think it's more than just about like the looks of this particular piece of wood. When it comes to discussing the vibes of a guitar, I think it's all about what types of things does it inspire you to play when you first pick it up. And that can come from a million different places that are strictly genre-wise or from who you've seen play it. Now, when I initially went down the rabbit hole of the offset, I was looking at a lot of the big modern indie players that people talk about. A lot of people that would pop up on my Spotify rap that really caught my ear because of like a contemporary indie, almost 90s inspired sound. A lot of people like Soccer Mommy, Snail Mail, Claro. And even going back, I think, to the early days of Coldplay when I would watch Johnny Buckland pull out his Jaguar and get some incredible tones, or to the actual 90s where I would watch Kurt Cobain write some of the greatest guitar riffs, I think, in history.
But just watching them wasn't necessarily enough for me. You have to dive into their world, and since I had already tried the Jazzmaster, I wanted to go just a little bit deeper.
You see, one of the most important moments in my gear journey by far was the day that I discovered G&L. It opened me up to an entirely different world, which was the world of alternatives, which at the time felt like this entirely new plane of possibility. It's like I could finally say after years and years, the Strat is great, the Fenders are amazing, they'll always be the OGs, but what else is there out there that I just haven't taken the time to look into? Like the guitar world, it's so much bigger than I could ever realize. So just like with G&L, I started looking again, and I ended up being made aware of a shop in Denmark of all places. And it may have taken a little bit of time to get here from overseas, but friends, I think we might have something interesting on our hands. Here it is. So the moment is here. The time has finally come. I'm anxious and excited at the same time. I haven't looked at it. I don't really even remember what color it's supposed to be. Oh my goodness. So this is the Wingman from Baum. They're a builder out of Denmark that started around 2015, and I immediately noticed that they had a couple of different offset models, but this is the one that really caught my eye. It's got a mahogany body, roasted maple neck, and Jazzmaster single coil pickups, which are supposedly medium output and pretty warm for single coils. Also, speaking as someone who's been layering back their use of trem systems to a dramatically more appropriate level, this does have a Bigsby, and I'm not even worried.
Now, as much as I loved breaking it down and figuring out what made the construction so special, I felt like the real test wasn't going to come until I took it out into the real world to see what it was really made of. But before I did that, I had to figure out what kind of sounds this offset body shape was even known for highlighting. Now, I'm well aware that when it comes to the electric guitar, there really is no one size fits all, right? A Strat could do jazz, a Les Paul could do funk, a 335 could potentially do metal. None of that is really groundbreaking news. But I do think that highlighting some of the specific ways that a specific guitar has been used historically in terms of tone can give some really important context into where its strengths might lie.
And of course, upon starting this, my thought process was, oh, it's an offset like the Jazzmaster, which I associated with all these different indie players that I was listening to. But then I had to look and see that there's so many different offset shapes that have been popular throughout history. Now, of those, this is clearly much more of a non-reverse Firebird type shape, which going in, I knew relatively nothing about. So I started with that research, and I looked online and I asked different friends, and I eventually found found that that body shape is traditionally associated with more of like a classic rock sound. And in the interest of getting better and understanding more about it, I built a pedal board that would highlight those specific sort of tones. You see, for classic rock, or CR as the kids will probably call it on TikTok in 20 years, we only needed a couple of things. The first of which happened to be an overdrive. I was between a DS1 and a tube screamer, a decision that I've been making more and more recently, and I ended up going with the tube screamer just because the DS1 was a little bit heavy. I was already going into an already pretty broken up amp, and I didn't want the tone to be overly distorted. Now, the other really important part of the board was having a really nuanced style spring reverb, and I didn't want to crank it too much because I didn't want it to be too wet in the mix, so I chose a 63 style spring. And lastly, when it comes to the amp, I didn't want too much of a direct sound, so I left some room noise in there, and it ended up sounding, well, I think when I started to play it, I could pretty clearly see the why when it comes to the sound of this guitar. Although I will say that the pickups were a lot warmer than what I was originally expecting when I was looking up different guitars with similar body shapes, it really comes down to the specific builder and remembering that even though it's a non-reverse Firebird shape, they really made it to be its own thing. All that being said, I did end up trying different genres that I play more frequently than classic rock. So I switched out the amp for something just a little bit darker and eliminated just a bit of the room noise. I also switched out the reverb to fit a more ambient style and put just a hair of delay without trying to be overbearing. So class, what did we learn today? That offset guitars are really cool and that hating on them is super wrong. Well, no, it's not actually that simple. I think that I learned that offset is such a wide term when it comes to the greater guitar narrative. There are so many different shapes and sizes and tones that come from these different guitars. I mean, asking someone if they liked offset guitars would be like asking someone if they like solid bodies. That's not even a descriptive enough question in the first place. And that gets me really excited for the alternate style offset shapes that I haven't even taken a look at yet. Like, if the Jazzmaster led me here, what guitar will I go to next? And what guitar will that lead me to? And what pedals will go well with that guitar? And will I like just the sound of that guitar? Or will I actually like the shape? Like, there's a million different questions and a million different ways to go. And the cool thing that I know is that all of those questions are valid, and all those questions will lead to more questions that stem from the different research that I actually put into it. I mean, even now I'm starting to look up different players historically when it comes to the non-reverse Firebird shape, and it's opening up this completely new world of music that I never thought I'd dive into. I mean, even when it comes to this guitar specifically, I start to wonder what associations I've already made in my mind. Like, will I lean on historically some of the traditional sounds that I found with this body shape, or will I try and do something completely new and let my inner contrarian just take over? I guess I'd say similarly to the question I asked before, I'm really excited about the fact that there is no inherent right answer. And even when it comes to these questions, I'm really excited about the opportunity to take a look more at just the pickups and the overall vibe of this guitar to see what it could actually become to me. And there really is no absolute timeline on that. I mean, that could take days, weeks, months, practice, gigs, sessions, whatever, but real talk, coach, I feel like I'm more than ready for it. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what coach thinks. What matters is what you think. So please let me know. Are you a fan of offset guitars? Are you like I was years ago and think they're just for indie kids who are trying so hard to be different and be not like the other guitar players? Have you played a Baum Wingman? Let me know all of it in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. It was super fun to be able to check out the Wingman, especially with it being another offset. And I've had this guitar in my hands for a couple months, and I've actually had this video idea for a couple months. So it's cool to finally see it come to fruition and to see what we could do with it. If you want to know anything more about the Wingman, the links are in the description. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do, or if you're just curious about any of the other gear, the pedals, the amps that I used in this video, make sure to check out those links. Like and subscribe if you had a good time, and most importantly, most important of all, have the most fantastic day of your life so far.